So hi everyone, my name is Laura House. I am the Senior Director of Instructional Design in Stanford's Center for Global and Online Education. I am here with my colleague Anindya Roy, who is our Senior Director of Learning Assessment and Research. And we're here today to talk to you about measuring the impact of a large portfolio of educational programs that we run. So we'll talk about some of the methodological challenge we've faced, some of the operational challenges we've faced, and what we've been doing to tackle those challenges. And one key framing for this talk is that our goal is not only to measure impact retrospectively after the fact, but also to proactively enhance the impact that our programs have in the first place. So we'll talk about how we've actually designed our evaluation process with that goal in mind. But first, a little bit about who we are. Anindya and I work in CIGO, which is Stanford, it's the Center for Global and Online Education within Stanford School of Engineering. We have our origins date back to the 1950s, actually. In the second half of the 20th century, we brought professional education programs to the local Silicon Valley ecosystem to help fuel a lot of the innovation that was happening at that time. Fast forwarding to today, we serve learners and organizations all around the world on a variety of topics. But throughout our history, our mandate has really stayed the same, and that is to bring Stanford knowledge and education to those who, for a variety of reasons, are not able to come and study in residence here at Stanford. And we have many different kinds of offerings ranging from fully online and hybrid degree programs to our online professional education courses and certificates, many of which are self-paced, and our custom programs for organizations that have particular learning needs. So all of these programs are taught by Stanford faculty, but they vary a lot in terms of the topic and the scope. So we have programs in technical topics like AI and cybersecurity. And we also have programs on leadership and energy and emerging energy innovation and digital transformation. So it's a huge variety of topics that we are covering. And all of these programs, of course, have very different learning outcomes. So we expect them to have very different kinds of impacts on learners and on organizations. So when we talk about impact, what do we even mean? Impact, the way we've been thinking about it, is not something that we can absolutely define. It might mean different things to different stakeholders, and I think that's an important point. So you could think about impact as the measurable effect of a learning program, but that will always be relative to the outcomes that a particular stakeholder values. And those stakeholders could include your learners, the organization you've created the program for, instructors, your own institution, et cetera. But you'll often see impact measurement being done along only one of these dimensions, for example, measuring whether the client's goals have been met. But no matter who you're measuring impact for, it's an intrinsically difficult job. And so next, Anindya will talk about some of those challenges.
Thank you, Laura. So as Laura mentioned, there are, impact can be defined for different stakeholders. And no matter for what stakeholder you're thinking about, there are a lot of different challenges that we have to solve. And they can be broadly bucketed into two categories. You can think of a handful of methodological challenges and a bunch of operational challenges. So for methodological challenges, you have to define, as Laura mentioned, which stakeholders you're thinking about and maybe a group of them. Again, no matter what method you follow, you have to isolate and attribute any impact coming from different learning experiences. You have to attribute it to different factors. And that is an intrinsically very, very difficult job. And we are not going to delve into that in this talk because, that is the kind of the ground truth. We have to work with that. However, as Laura also mentioned, we also have to balance between prospective information and retrospective information. Like measuring impact by definition is kind of looking back and seeing what happened. But if you get to know and get to change the outcome towards something more positive, then we want to do that. So we want to strike a balance between these two goals. And also, we want to collect more information about external factors. We'll go more into that external to the learners. So that's not something done conventionally as often as we want to see. In terms of operational challenges, we often have limited access to longitudinal data. Like once a learner leaves an educational program, in this context, it's very, very difficult to get hold of them. Again, that is something that is pervasive to any method that you want to follow where you need longitudinal data. And similarly, collecting data consistently across different methods and doing the data analysis with cross-functional teams, all of these pose various kind of challenges, and we will address a bunch of them. So next slide, please. Yeah. So the bold-faced points are the ones that we are going to talk about in more detail, or we have already talked about, like the defining impact. So in the next slide, we are going to talk about a couple of frameworks that are used most conventionally for measuring impact. So the most well-known is Kirkpatrick's 4-level model, where you measure the learner satisfaction, their level of learning, their behavior and results that come from that training program. And this framework, like all frameworks, they're like, useful heuristics. It gives you a bunch of things that you measure right when the program is ending or throughout the program. So you measure satisfaction and learning at that time. For measuring behavior and results, you are heavily dependent on longitudinal data. You want to see what happens over time, and you want to follow a set of learners. You want to see what their performances are in an organization, all of which are pretty difficult to gather. An addition to this model came from Jack Phillips, who added a 5th level, which is the apex of the pyramid, which is return on investment. And that measured dollar-to-dollar return on investment of your educational program for an organization which got that. Now, that also runs into the same problem of being able to attribute a dollar outcome like specific to very factors which are intermingled with each other, and doing that really well is very, very difficult inherently. And if we go to the next slide, we see that all of them are heavily focused on the learners and not necessarily focused on the learners or factors that are centered on learners, and not necessarily talking about external factors like, say, organizational readiness, or whether the learner has enough support from their immediate team or their manager, and these kind of aspects. And most of them require longitudinal studies the way we are looking at it. So because of that, they also don't tell you what to fix in time. And based on all these limitations, what we thought that we want to look at, longitudinal data when we can gather, that's fantastic. We would depend on that to further bolster our impact report. On the other hand, we are focusing primarily on surveys, and we would do that. We would enhance our end of the program survey to the extent we can to get as much prospective information as we can. So with that in mind, we added a set of questions to learn more about the learner's plans, about how they're going to apply what they learned, and also what kind of external challenges they see. So if you look at this question where we ask them about the barriers that they anticipate, what they might see no challenges in for them to apply what they learned, or they feel that they might see some need for more experience or more confidence. They might need additional skills that they have not gotten in that program. And those are all what we would say learner-centered problems. And then we have a set of points which are more like external to the learner. So the learner might need more support from their team managers. They might need to see organizational changes. And these points are usually not covered in the traditional frameworks. So we have been running this question for a few of our enterprise education programs for last few months, and we don't have a huge amount of data, but the results that we are seeing so far is very encouraging. We see that the top 2 points that learners are mentioning in terms of barriers are that they need to see organizational changes in terms of policies, incentives, etc., and they also want to see, they also need more support from their team and managers. And so these are like almost like 19% and 42% and 19%. And then we have like no major challenges as the third most popular point here, followed by other more learner-centered factors. So if we go to the next slide, we see that, this end of the program survey is one survey in an array of a lot of different surveys that we do at various points of the learner journey. And so, for example, we do have our a single shot survey for learners, say 6 to 12 months after they end their program, or other longitudinal surveys. Sometimes we have interviews. So the entire impact is measured based on all these different data points, but we needed to enhance our end of the program survey so that we can get a lot of prospective information that could tell us, that could be useful to the organizations in terms of how to best use their learners' skills that they have gotten from our programs. With that, I'll pass it back to Laura for the implementation.
So one of the things I think we're most proud of is the operational changes that we've made. And as Anindya mentioned, you can have sound methodology for measuring impact, but you also need to have the operational kind of infrastructure and conditions to implement that. So back in 2020, it was widely acknowledged, I think, within our organization that our core surveys and this is for our open enrollment professional programs, so not our academic online programs, not our custom enterprise programs, basically our online professional education courses, a lot of which are self-paced. Those surveys were, end of course surveys, were not adequately serving the needs of the organization. And at that time, each individual survey was actually being created and managed by an individual program manager. And that was creating, as you can imagine, a lot of inconsistency and was a big administrative burden because we do have hundreds of courses that we run. So in 2020, around the time actually that I came into SIGO, my team took over ownership of those surveys in the instructional design team. There was a desire at that time to have some differentiation in the questions that were asked. There was still an expectation of a certain level of program manager control over what was being asked. And so at that time, we did keep separate surveys, but we moved to a common core set of survey questions that was consistent across every course or program. And my team also took over management of those surveys and really streamlined the way that they were created and the process for reporting out survey results. And we took ownership over, surfacing some of the insights that were coming out of those surveys. So that's the middle picture here. But this also aligned to an era in our organization where we started to become more data-driven in general. So as this shift was happening with the end of course surveys, we also had a team that was building a data lake where our data from multiple sources across all of our systems could be integrated and combined in new and insightful ways. So that really that cultural shift, I guess, laid the groundwork for Anindya in 2023 to come in, and he was hired into this new senior director role that was focused on these questions of evaluation and data and measuring impact. And so over the past couple of years, Anindya and I have, although I take very little of the credit, but we've worked together to move from many different surveys into one single, what we call integrated survey. So that's one survey that we now deploy across all of our professional courses and programs. And this makes it much easier for us to analyze just the sheer volume of data that we're getting on a regular basis. And just to give an example, back in 2020, it was almost impossible to change a single question in our surveys. There were just too many survey owners and versions. And from 2020 to 2025, it was quite possible to change one of the core survey questions, but this had to be done, of course, across hundreds of surveys. So it took, say, a couple of 2 to 3 person days of effort to make that change. And now in 2025, we can change a single survey question in a couple of hours, as well as push that data out directly to the dashboards that our teams are using. And so this was a huge step for us to becoming more agile, more data-driven, and even more experimental with the questions that we're asking and the way and what we're learning about our programs and how we actually design our courses and programs. So this was a big, I guess, digital transformation project for us. And it took 5 years to get to this point for our open enrollment programs. It involved a lot of cultural change, mindset shifts, getting buy-in from senior leadership, investing in new resources and capabilities and infrastructure. But because we laid that groundwork for our open enrollment courses, earlier this year, we were able to make the same transition for our enterprise programs, transitioning to a single integrated survey in only a matter of a couple of months. And so that's a different survey. It's also an integrated survey. It has about 90% of questions in common with our other integrated survey that we use in our B2C programs. And we're able to do a lot of interesting cross comparisons as well between those two integrated surveys. But now Anindya will take us through the workflow that we're actually using to collect this data and push it out to our various users.
Thank you, Laura. So I also see that we are running pretty fast and we have quite a bit of time. So in case you have any questions up to this point, feel free to ask it. Like stop us anytime. We can otherwise go on.
Oh, you have a question?
Yeah. Hi, Gregory.
Hi. Yeah, I was just wondering, how do you deal with a situation where perhaps like a program director or activity director maybe has unique questions because they're planning on doing like scholarly activity? Because we've tried to like standardize our evaluations, but there's always these like one-off questions that ours doesn't capture, but they need that data for a specific project. And then we're like, are we going to ask our learners to do two separate evaluations? That seems like a terrible idea because then they do one or the other. So I didn't know how you kind of approach that situation when you do have someone who's like, I need data that you're not currently collecting in your standardized integrated template.
I'll let you take that one, Anindya.
Okay. So I would say that it's a great question. It's a standard problem. I think the solution for us was like a combination of different factors. So first we can say the technical solution to this is, to the extent it is, say, based on a program or something that is easily identifiable. We run our surveys on Qualtrics, and Qualtrics accepts this kind of embedded data that you can set based on the query string, and like the URL string which is embedded, and based on the, say, some initial answers that the respondents provide, say, on the first page of the survey, you can choose to show a certain section or not show a certain section. Like, for example, we don't ask for demographic data in all our surveys. For example, for enterprise education, although that section is there in that survey, but we just so you can potentially include that in your like some truly different questions. You can include it that way. That's one aspect. The other thing is our organization is comparatively smaller compared to many other organizations. I can imagine situations where that solution would not work. And like, for example, even for us, we could not accommodate our enterprise learning survey and the professional ed surveys altogether in one, although that was our original idea. So sometimes it is just not possible. So let's accept that. And the third thing is, that was part of a lot of internal communications that is not necessarily like technical solution, where you have to figure out, do we really need that question? Is it truly unique? Are we not capturing? Can we change some other standing question to capture that? So for example, we also have I think that those are the non-technical, but at the same time very time consuming and also worthwhile endeavors that we need to do.
Great, thank you. That first approach with that kind of branching logic was my recommendation to our teams. So I'm glad to hear that sounds like in alignment with what you're doing with Qualtrics. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
However, what I would say is that, at some point that becomes unscalable, right? Like if you have a large number of kind of custom requests for this. So I think where we've used it successfully, for example, is in our programs that offer continuing education units. And I believe there's certain kinds of questions and data that they need to be able to offer those. And it's pretty standard set of questions that they need to ask. And so that is one area, because we have, a certain group of courses that need this. That was a case where we felt confident, that we could have a kind of a custom path for those learners to go down in the survey. But I think for one-off requests, generally what we try to do is steer them in a direction of getting the data in another way. And maybe that's a separate survey for that question. Maybe that's a question we didn't actually need to ask. Or maybe it's a question that becomes part of our core survey because it's actually a useful question for us to ask in the first place. But
okay, so maybe I see there's AI agents. That's a great question. Let's get to that, but let's quickly finish
let's
the rest
quickly
of our
finish up. We
presentation.
only have a couple more slides, and then I think
Yeah. So our this is the bird's eye view of our data flow. We have our survey on Qualtrics, and a lot of them are implemented in our Moodle LMS learning management system in the courseware where the learners take the survey, their data go back to Qualtrics. From that, we have our data lake infrastructure on Amazon Web Services, AWS. So it goes on to S3 bucket, and from that, we do some post-processing with that data. We present them as tables on Athena system, and from that, we do some more processing, and then we show the insights and results and visualizations on QuickSight, which is like the dashboard system for AWS. And from that, we have all these quote unquote insights. They are used by the end users who are instructional designers, program managers, data analysts, senior leadership. And that happens at a less frequent cadence. Like the surveys run constantly. The data gets processed every day, batch processing. And then we look at the data, say, at a weekly or monthly cadence. And however, what we learn from that is very important, and we discuss a lot of that, and the feedback goes back into the survey on Qualtrics. We change that, and that cycle of experimentation has been truly transformative for us, or at least the knowledge that we can change question easily, and we can see how quickly we can get new information from 100 different surveys running at the same time. So that helps us be more agile and change quickly. So with that, I'll pass it back to Laura to close our session up.
And I would just add that our open enrollment courses don't have a fixed start and end date. They're pretty much always open. And so we're always getting data in, and that allows us to, and that is one of the reasons we chose to focus on this portfolio first, so that we can really refine the process and then transfer that to our other portfolios that are more kind of cohort-based, rapid experimentation. So in conclusion, we've made improvements in our methodology that allow us to collect prospective information, including information about the perceived organizational barriers to application. Operationally, we've established workflows that allow us to act on the information that we get quickly and responsively. And together, these improvements are allowing us to intervene early on short cycles, to address likely barriers to impact, to have conversations with clients about how to best, maximize the impact that they're getting from these programs. It's allowing us to be more experimental with our program design as well as the survey questions themselves. And this aligns ultimately with our goal of not just retrospectively measuring impact, but actually proactively enhancing the impact of our programs. So, and ultimately results in better service for our learners and clients. So I think that's now is a great time to take that. We have 2 minutes left to take that question on AI.
Yes. Do you want to take that, or
well, I actually, I'm screen sharing. I didn't see the question.
Okay. So the question is what our plans are about AI agents impact our workflow. Like the short answer is we are not planning to implement any AI agentic workflow for our surveys right now. Although we have recently opened an AI chatbot that is just a regular chatbot replaced by now AI chatbot built in-house by our very capable the same team which made the data lake. So I'll stop there if Laura wants to add anything. I have some thoughts, but
I think those discussions are very nascent for us, so I don't think we have any definitive answers today.
Yeah, I would leave it there. I mean, for things where, okay, let's see. From Christy, How are we handling qualitative data? Great question. Right now, our main qualitative data that we get are from like the open-ended questions where learners leave responses. So right now, we manually look at them. Like the program managers are super on top of that. They always like look at what answers are coming in. Down the line, we want to implement more like say sentiment analysis and other kind of flow. And that is, for example, one possibility to include like either large language model based agentic workflow to analyze some of that bucket topics and all those things, or more conventional, natural language processing systems. We haven't implemented those yet. So I see we are at time. So we'll stop here, but hopefully you have our emails. So reach back at us if you have any questions. We'll be happy to answer.